Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Tulsa King Season 1, Episode 8. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, Dwight and Mitch are trying to get the team properly prepared, not really filling them in on everything. Even Tyson's like, what's this all about? Why are you trying to get us to defend ourselves? But Dwight's keeping them in the dark. I mean, to be fair, we know he's a made man. We know he's been they label him as a general and stuff, but we don't know what Dwight's experience actually is at leading. He's always probably, and then, as we kind of know, he's always taken orders. So that's why I'm curious, has he ever had, I think as a general kind of seen in that regard, I would assume you would have had some leadership experience and stuff like that. So, I don't know. I'm just curious, how much experience he's had leading a group before. But I love it's everyone's taking shooting practice and stuff, and then there's Tyson trying to do it sideways. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm doing it my own style. It's and then Mitch does it and actually hits everything over and over again. It's that kind of put Tyson to shame, but it's also you look stupid. You're going to get shot if you start, because it's you hold a gun this way. You're going to he's trying to hold it sideways, trying to be cool with it. It's that's stupid. It's that's something you've picked up in movies and TV shows. It's I don't know if anyone actually ever really, really does that in real life. And I also get where Bodhi comes from. I'm not much of a gun person either. It's but ever since Dwight came into his life, I kind of do need a gun. But the one who did the best is Grace. And it's how'd you learn to shoot? It's she's because of my dad. And it's that whole thing. It's that's an interesting conversation. It's that's some backstory. I'm curious, will we ever really dive a lot into? She's the whole didn't she say he shot himself 2 years ago or something like that? And she actually got Dwight. She's at least tell us you're actually sorry for dragging us into this. And he's I actually am sorry. She's well, thank you. That's at least a kind of a first step. Because for her, she's we're adults. We accept the fact is we knew what it meant playing with other people's toys. It's just at least, be a leader. Let us know what's happening, And for Dwight, it did strike a nerve with him, because it did mean a lot for him, because it's right, I do need to kind of keep that in consideration. All of you are under my protection, so I need to do an even better. That's why I'm doing this in the first place. I want you guys to be able to defend yourself, but you guys aren't soldiers. So he goes to Dwight. He goes to the guy that they do business with through Bodhi, that we do. And it's he's going to have the casino in his name and stuff like that. So he's going to get a percentage of it, which even he's right, well, why should I even do business? It's Dwight's, Bodhi's Dwight's this, and that. But the man does really know what he's doing. So it's right, you're already in business with him. It's all right, in for a penny, in for a pound. So that whole casino thing is kind of going, doing its thing. At the same time, you have Stacy confronting Waltrip about Roxy. And he's I have no idea where she is and stuff like that. And just Stacy, I feel probably wasn't the smartest thing to do to just straight up confront him like that. But hey, he did kill your informant. But also, Stacy's feeling guilty because, let's not forget, Roxy expressly said last episode, I don't want to go back. Stacy's the one that pushed her to do it. And it cost her life because she went back in one more time getting the laptop you wanted her to get. So they end up, I can't remember. I think this conversation happened first was her and the FBI going back and forth. And I love that the FBI was Dwight Manfredi, he went on some dinner date with some lady, Margaret Devereaux. And in that moment, you could tell, there was a little twitch to her head. Stacy got was wait, what? With that information, I'm I was are we setting up a love triangle here? I was it seems like it. I was because that's the once again, you can't help who you like, because she doesn't like Dwight. There's a whole complicated thing about who and what he is. The fact is that's in direct contrast with her career and everything, but she can't help it because for some reason she likes Dwight, and she probably doesn't even really fully understand it herself. Didn't her therapist make some reference to that guy that reminds you of your dad? I'm oh, is that what are we leaning into like stereotypes here? Is it supposed to be like, oh, like what she likes about Dwight? It's like there's, I mean, especially because she had an issue with the age gap, regardless. And so I'm like, oh, is it supposed to be like a situation of like, oh, it's kind of like a daddy issues type of thing? I don't know if that's what they're kind of leaning into. Like, that's why I'll be like, wait, did I hear that right? Did that therapist say like, oh, like the guy that reminds you of your dad? I'm like, wait, is that what that was about? Is that what that's all? That's interesting if that ends up playing in some regard to that, you know? But once again, I mean, maybe it has more so to do about who she is right now, where she is in her career, and also just everything with her ex. I mean, it's interesting too because we had that whole situation with Margaret and her ex this episode because him and Dwight met, and it's like, oh, okay, and he's like, yeah, you're trying to fleece my wife. My ex. It's like, are you really more concerned about her? Which it seemed like there might be concern there, but he has a stake in the business too. So it's like, if she gets fleeced, I'm getting fleeced. So maybe that's his big issue. But he's like, oh yeah, I've come across people like you before. Like, you don't scare me. Like, I've bumped head with this and that. And he's like, the Klan. I was like, oh, the Klan was. Because of Watchmen, I'm like, the Klan probably did have a pretty big did they have a big presence in Tulsa? And I was like, well, the whole Black Wall Street situation kind of, indicates, and once again, just like the entire show, Watchmen will make you go like, yeah, that there's some, I don't know how massive of a presence it was, and whether that's still a presence today, which I'm curious about. The fact that, I don't know if that's just him talking like specifically way in the past he was talking about, like, oh, he had to dust up with them, or he's like, I'm curious what their presence is like still today. I mean, obviously they're active anywhere, Regardless, it's just, that one in particular caught my attention. I was like, huh. It almost felt like it caught Dwight's attention too. And I was like, huh, all the people he's had run-ins with. But it's like, yeah, that guy's a douche. And it's like, yeah. It's like, he's like, for the life of me, I can't understand why you married that guy in the first place. So, I brought it up last episode too. I'm like so curious where that whole dynamic is going. Especially because Margaret made that whole point of like, oh, I just always want to know what it was like to kill someone. I'm like, what kind of dinner conversation is that? Because like I said, I thought she'd be like a little like turned away because she found out who Dwight was, but she's like, oh, like I could Google, it was like 20 minutes or something like that, so I guess she just never bothered looking up before then, but maybe afterwards, after he talked about his past, maybe she looked it up, or maybe because he was so open about it, she never did. But I'm like, that's so interesting. I don't know, maybe her and Stacy are like, there's something there deep inside of them that's like some darkness in them that's attracted to the darkness that is Dwight. Like, I don't know. I mean, also had this situation with Tyson and his dad, which, his dad's like, right, we did the best that we could, but at the end of the day, you got to make choices. He's like, yes, you're basically, you're old enough to make your own decisions and stuff, but you're also young enough to make the wrong ones. But it's like, God bless you, son. Like, you made your choice. Like, all I can do is, he's like, because he talks about like, your mom, because Tyson was like, oh, is mom not going to come out to see me? It's like, no, she can't. It's like, well, why not? It's like, she's crying. Like, the fact is, you won't understand until you have children of your own. If you have children. He's like, yeah, Dad, I'm going to have kids one day. And it's like, yeah, but he's like, when you used to be young and on top of, like, something on a playground, 10 feet in there, he's like, my heart would stop. It would catch in my throat. And it's like, he's like, yeah, but I would be okay. He's like, yeah, but I was on a playground, and son, this ain't no playground anymore. But he's like, wishing his son the best. But, I mean, you still kind of got dusted up with the, war trip and his bikers, so once again, I feel like there's still so much there with his dad about like his dad might not be like the mild-mannered guy, and I think Tyson kind of realized that too, but I like his dad's not the mild-mannered guy that you think he is. But I mean, that was just him simply being like, hey, I'm a father, my son's gonna be mixed up in this, I'm gonna be mixed up in this. So maybe that's all there is to it, but I just feel like there's still more to his story too. The FBI ended up NADF ended up raiding Waltrick's place, ended up arresting most of his guys, got the laptop, and it's like, oh yeah, he's got all this money. And it's like, I think they explained how he actually got all that money, but it's still kind of like, huh. I guess it's because it's like, right, he's a biker. I think a lot of them did not take him seriously as a kind of like a big threat, but kind of showcasing that he is. Not unless he's a small fish in an even bigger pond. Like, not unless even he kind of reports to somebody. I mean, he seems like he's in charge, but maybe that whole situation is just, maybe he's just trying to put himself in a bigger pool of like, yo, I'm in the criminal world. He's just trying to make a name for himself. I love that he's sitting the cops, his guys, after Dwight. It's like, I don't know, your corrupt cops, figure something out, make something up to get him arrested so I have an easier time killing him in prison. And then it's like, yeah, they rolled up on him, but Dwight wasn't having that. Play the biggest bluff, being like, I will basically blow a hole in both of you, so do not let that biker guy get you killed. Turn around and walk away. They're like, we know where you are, we know where you live, we know where to find you. And he's like, same thing, like he was about to say, I do too, or something like that. I forgot the exact phrasing, but you're like, oh, that's so. It's like, oh, Tyson's like, what was that all about? He's like, broken tail light. I forgot my gun at the hotel, which I'm like, I guess he really did. I don't know. I wasn't sure because I don't see Dwight being the, oh, I forget my gun type of guy, but maybe he legitimately did. But that might have, maybe it's like, it felt like that was him bluffing, but I'm also, part of me is like, maybe he actually wasn't. Because I guess he knows, like, if he actually did pull it out, that would have been the whole situation regardless. Obviously, we also catch up with Chicky, and, yep, it's like, we're going after Dwight. I'm like, what did Dwight ever legitimately do to you, except go to prison for 25 years for your father? Like, for your family, like, you know? And it's just like, because even that guy, Johnny, he's like, whoa. I mean, this is the general we're talking about. I mean, can't we find another way? He's trying to be like, and I that's what also like makes Goody so two-faced. And it's like, he was two-faced last episode, considering he was there reporting on Dwight. But it's like, yeah, Chicky's the boss now, so like, you have to fall in line. So I'm like, you're not putting up any resistance? Like, you're already all like good, like everything's great between you and Dwight, and you're back here backing the dude that's like, yeah, we're gonna take Dwight out. It's like, once again, I guess it's just like, hey, I'm following orders, I gotta fall in line. Without Chicky's dad around anymore, I gotta follow him. He's a big man now, so I gotta follow the big man's decision. So, but I'm still like, man, that just seemed a little. But also, you see what happens if there's any dissension amongst the rank. I mean, he'd be outnumbered anyway, because like, obviously Vince is like, oh yeah, Vince has been like, yo, I want him dead. You know, Chicky's had issues with him since episode 1. Same thing with Vince. Now they kind of have nothing left holding him back. Also, like, Chicky's already had an issue with Dwight because, like, how high above his father. Once again, his father made comparisons like, you were not even half the man he was. You know, and that's one of the last things he said to his dad before he killed him. So he has so many unresolved issues with his dad, plus killing his dad, all that hatred and anger at himself. He's pointing at Dwight, because for him, it's like, right, it's not on me. If it wasn't for Dwight, none of this would have happened. I never would have had to kill my father. But it's also, there's a lot of underlining stuff there between him and his dad, considering like that whole thing last episode of like, yeah, he wanted a different life. He's like, I could have been this, I could have been that. My dad's the one that dragged me into this world, kind of stole my life from me. And then on top of that, not only did you drag me into this world, kind of made it all that I have no other prospects but this, but then now you also insult me by being like, yeah, you're nothing like Dwight. It's like, that's all that matters to you. I'm your actual flesh and blood. Yeah, he's like a brother to you, but I'm your actual son. So a lot of that, I'm sure, is fueling that. So he's calling up Dwight. He's like, yo, let's bury the hatchet, blah, 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 blah. You're like, wow, look at you selling this. And so he's like, yo, me, I think he's like, me, Vince, Goody, we're all going to come down there in Tulsa, which I'm like, interesting to see how that plays out. I can't tell Dwight knows, like, hey, we're not, I mean, because he was telling him, like, hey, me and your dad, like, basically sent someone to kill me, which I'm like, I don't think it was his dad. I think it might have been Chicky who did it even back then. That was kind of my theory, but hey, maybe it actually was, maybe even Chicky's dad had no idea that went down. Like, he probably thought, like, oh, that's just, he probably had no idea, like, someone probably said that, or maybe it actually was Chicky's dad. But my money, like, ever since that got introduced, I was like, I think it's Chicky. Like, I don't think it was his dad, but maybe, with Chicky still in the picture, I think we'll potentially find out. But it's interesting. Once I brought it up previously too, like, war on two fronts. Wall Trip and then like Chicky. To be fair, Wall Trip is kind of on his own now. Like by the ending, like most of his people were arrested, so all he had was him and his lieutenant. But and even by the end of the episode, he doesn't even have that. He's just on his own. But now it's like you got the full force of Chicky, because like you can't do anything against Chicky because I don't know how, once again, not a mafioso, so I don't know how the hierarchy necessarily like works. I'm sure they're going to be like, this ain't no movie or TV show. That's not how it doesn't work like how you see the movies. And like they could easily do that. But like once Chicky's removed from the board, would they, I mean, like would Dwight be the next in line if Chicky was removed? Because he has right by, like, you know, he's the heir to the throne, but being a veteran member and stuff like that, would it all go to Dwight? And will that be where we find Dwight kind of caught between New York and Tulsa? It's like, right, now that everything's settled in New York, you can come back, but you set up a life for yourself in Tulsa. Like, so what are you going to do? Try and reclaim all this that didn't want you? A reminder of the 25 years you went away for nothing, or the home that you're building for yourself, the family you're kind of building for yourself, because that will always be someone else's that, you know, you got, whereas everything in Tulsa is something you made on your own. So maybe that's the situation Dwight will find himself at the end of the season. We'll see. So it's definitely going to be interesting. Like, there's no way Chicky or Vince is making it out of this season. Maybe Goody as well. I don't know. He might side with, I don't know. It just depends on how that plays out. Like, I just don't know if Dwight sees that setup coming or not. But maybe he hears it in Chicky's voice of like, are you really going to let this go? It's like, because he still doesn't know for sure that Chicky's the one that went after Emery episode before last. So, you know. Well, she does talk to Tina in this episode, and she was like, right, maybe we'll do the whole Tulsa thing. And I guess with all this plate spinning with everything with Waltrip, it's kind of like, now it's probably not the best time. But he's like, no, I'm trying to, I want to see my grandkids. I want to make sure the perfect room. And she's like, yeah, you and me did just start like getting to know each other. We've seen each other, like really getting to know each other. So maybe we should take things slow. I think everything with Nico did go a long way. I mean, obviously, like him saying what he said at the time, doing what he did as her father, I think it did kind of strike a chord with her, because for so long he was just a stranger to her. But I think in that moment it kind of made her feel like, right, you are my dad again. You know, you're the man I kind of remembered you were, like before we lost touch 18 years prior, you know? So we'll see where things kind of go on that front. Also, there's the Armand situation, which I thought was so interesting, too. His wife is kind of like, oh, like, you know, what's going on at work? He's like, oh, it's fine. Roxy's just up and disappeared, and it's like, yeah, Peggy's actually kind of worried. And for her, that was just kind of like, yeah, like, so are we going to move or not? He's like, no, I'm not leaving. And I think it's maybe... The thing is, I think for Armand, he had to hide who he was for so long that his wife is like, this isn't the good, honest man that I married. It's like, this is who he always was. It's just he buried it so deep because he didn't want to attract too much attention. But being around, I don't know why I sounded like Bugs Bunny there, around Elmer Fudd is one specifically. Either way, being around, Dwight kind of brought that out of him again. It's like he's a wise guy again to some extent, and I think that came out of him, like especially the way he's like, I'm not leaving. He's like, you can't keep running forever. I think for him, he's like, if he had his way, he's like, I would have never left Brooklyn. I would have never been here. He's like, this had nothing to do with you, Clara. It's just like, sometimes you just got to stop running. And he's been running for like nearly 2 decades. So it's kind of like, I'm done with that. Like, I want to just live my life. And, you know, I want to take a stand. But she's like, oh, you want to take a stand? That's fine. You got mixed up with a guy who came in here, put a gun in your face. Now what? You're super compatible. Like, it's all Gucci now. And it's like, yeah, it kind of is. I work for him. It's like, now there's people at your job. To be fair, in his defense, that was already going to be there regardless of Dwight. But Dwight has steered, you know, stuff up. It's like, he's kind of been a bad influence on Stacy. Even his therapist, even her therapist being like, yeah, you probably should. Just like, you're heading in a direction where your career could kind of explode, but she's kind of spiraling a little bit after everything. I think the Roxy stuff kind of finally pushed her over the edge. But it's like, to be fair, it's like Roxy was already working for World Trip. That was already all bubbling beneath the surface. Dwight just happens to be the match to the powder keg that was already here. He just and happened to add a lot of fuel to that fire. So, but his wife's like, yeah, either we move or we get a divorce. And then Armand just like throws his plate, and she's like, cool, find somewhere else to sleep or we will. And everyone's like, yeah, not good. So that's going to be interesting to see. But it's like, yeah, just further proof of just how much of an impact Dwight's had on everyone. Some positive, some negative, some undecided right now, whether or not it's good or bad. So it's definitely going to be interesting what happens on that front. But we also have the ending where Stacy shows up and it's like, yeah, Wall Trip and his guy. It's like, oh, you got him busted. It's like, no, but it's just him and his lieutenant on the run. And it's like, okay, he's like, so you want to come up? And she's like, what? No, I said we were done. He's like, oh, I thought you didn't mean that. She's like, yeah, I meant it. It's like, oh, it's just like him being like, oh, he legitimately thought like, oh, I thought you were saying that just to say that. I didn't think you actually meant it. And it's like, yeah, she's like, oh, besides you already, he's like, what? She's like, nothing, don't worry about it. She's like, no, what were you going to say? He's like, from what I heard, you have a girlfriend. He's like, oh, you jealous? And she's like, no, I'm not jealous. And he's like, a little bit. It's like, I was about to say, it seemed like it a little bit. And she's like, you are so unreal. I'm like, man, you really like him because you are getting a little jealous. But Wall Trip rolls up because it's like, right, the cops legitimately like, yeah, we couldn't find Dwight. It's like, oh, yeah, because the last thing you want to tell Wall Trip is you ran into Dwight and he legitimately scared you, so you backed away. Because they're also like, yeah, Wall Trip's not worth dying over. So Wall Trip decided to handle things himself. He rolls up, Stacy gets shot, his lieutenant's dead. So, and obviously Dwight's like, cool, I'm extra motivated. I already didn't like you. You're already gunning for me. I made a point. Now you retaliated and now you shot Stacy. I like Stacy, so I'm going to kill you. So he has Tyson hide the gun. The cops roll up and now he's in the middle of it. So you got blown your hands and you're involved in this. And he's like, yeah, my name's Manfredi. So how that's going to play out, we'll see. I mean, he didn't actually, but then it's going to raise a whole bunch of questions. Why was Stacy there to see you? I guess I was like, well, the argument could be like, oh, I'm another one of her informants. But if you say that, that puts you in a position like you're a rat. And obviously, like he doesn't abide by that because once again, despite his complications with everything, with Pete and everything, it's like you still are a you still believe in the code and stuff like that. So we'll see where all that goes. Hopefully Stacy's okay. I think she will be, but I mean, you never know with those situations. You're like, oh, it's just one gunshot in a TV show. It's like one gunshot in a TV show is still enough to kill somebody in some regards. So it's not like she's gonna definitely be okay. But I could definitely see this black, because didn't they also bring up the fact is the FBI, they were like, yeah, we also got aware that he's around some other lady, and then like Stacy cut them off. I'm like, okay, so they're aware there's some other lady in his life, but they didn't specify who, like, because they don't know, because she's been able to keep that under wraps enough, but they're already aware that there's some other lady in his life, so they're probably, there's going to be a whole bunch of questions about why she was there in the first place, so we'll see how that all plays out. I'm sure there might be surveillance footage that shows both of them popping off on World Trip, so who knows? Like I said, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us. Only 2 episodes left this season, so obviously, whatever goes on next episode is going to set the tone, obviously, for the season. Or set the tone and story for the season finale. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.